Before we get to the interview of Amy Goodman interviewing Omer Bartov, scholar on the Holocaust, I would like to go through a brief history of weaponizing the term anti-Semite. Following the Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, there was a widespread consensus in Western societies to combat anti-Semitism, which had led to the genocide of 6 million Jews. This created a sensitive environment where any criticism of Jews or Israel could be conflated with anti-Semitism. The Six-Day War marked a significant turning point in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel's victory in the war and subsequent occupation of Palestinian territories led to increased international scrutiny and criticism of its policies. In response, supporters of Israel began to use accusations of anti-Semitism to deflect criticism and discredit opponents. The 1975 UN Resolution 3379, which equated Zionism with racism, was passed by the United Nations General Assembly, but later revoked in 1991. It further intensified the politicization of anti-Semitism, with some arguing that criticism of Israel's policies was being unfairly conflated with anti-Jewish sentiment. During the period of the 80s and 90s, accusations of anti-Semitism were increasingly deployed as a tactic to silence criticism of Israel, particularly in academic and political contexts. Pro-Israel advocacy groups and politicians utilized charges of anti-Semitism to delegitimize critics and marginalize dissenting voices. The early 2000s saw a notable escalation in the use of accusations of anti-Semitism to suppress criticism of Israel, particularly in the wake of the Second Intifada and the rise of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions (BDS) movement. Critics argue that this tactic has been employed to shield Israel from accountability for its human rights abuses and violations of international law. Now, off to the interview of Omer Bartov.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue to look at the crackdown on student-led Gaza solidarity encampments across U.S. campuses, we look now at how the Biden administration and several members of Congress have echoed intensifying accusations that the peaceful student-led pro-Palestinian protests are anti-Semitic. We're joined now by Omer Bartov. He's professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Brown University. His recent piece is headlined "Weaponizing Language: Misuses of Holocaust Memory and the Never Again Syndrome." The professor recently visited the Student Gaza Solidarity Encampment at the University of Pennsylvania, sharing on social media a photograph with the Israeli historian Raz Segal and a message that said, quote, "With Raz Segal at the UPenn encampment on April 26th, warm and open conversation about the perils of anti-Semitism and its current weaponization," unquote. Omer Bartov is also author of numerous books, including Genocide, the Holocaust, and Israel-Palestine, First-Person History in Times of Crisis. He's an Israeli-American scholar who's been described by the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum as one of the world's leading specialists on the subject of genocide. He's joining us now from his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Professor Bartov, welcome back to Democracy Now! If you can talk about what's happening on these college campuses, what your visit to the UPenn encampment was like. As your own university, Brown University, students have set up an encampment, and their chant is "From Columbia to Brown, we will not let Gaza down." And talk about what authorities are charging are the charges of anti-Semitism, although so many of those involved in these encampments are Jewish, with groups like Jewish Voice for Peace.
Good morning, Amy. Thank you for having me again. Well, look, I mean, my visit to UPenn, I was there with Raz Segal. We first actually gave a talk, both of us, about anti-Semitism and its current weaponization. And then we visited the encampment. It was a beautiful afternoon. There were very nice, good students there. We sat and chatted with them. We talked about anti-Semitism and about its current use. There was absolutely no sign of any violence, of any anti-Semitism at all. There were Jewish students there. There were Arab students there. There were all kinds of young people there, and the atmosphere was very good. The next day, I heard that the authorities of UPenn had decided to shut down the encampment. A couple of days earlier, I was passing by the green at Brown University, and again, there was an encampment there. Students were sitting there quietly, singing, playing the guitar. It was all very peaceful. And that same day, I heard from a faculty member who had visited that encampment that he had received an email from the dean of the faculty warning him that if he were to show up there again, measures would be taken. And now this issue is being debated at Brown. I believe today, this afternoon, there would be a meeting with the faculty, many of whom are, of course, like me, very upset by this kind of arbitrary action, which was taken without any consultation with faculty. So that's the kind of context. Look, I mean, obviously, anti-Semitism, as myself and many others have said, is a vile sentiment. It's an old sentiment. It has been used for bloodshed, for violence, and for genocide, and no one should condone it. And obviously, none of us would ever condone it. But it has also become a tool to silence speech about Israel. And that too has quite a history. And the current Israeli government, or rather the numerous governments under Benjamin Netanyahu, have been pushing this agenda of arguing that any criticism of Israeli policies, not least of Israeli occupation policies, this precedes, of course, events in Gaza, is anti-Semitic. And I've been listening to some of the interviews with Jewish students who feel threatened, and often it appears to me, and of course we don't have good research on that at the moment, but it appears to me that many of them feel threatened because they see a Palestinian flag, because they hear people calling for intifada. Intifada means shaking off. There's a very similar word in Hebrew for it, leitnael. It's what a dog does when it shakes off water. It's to shake off the occupation. And there are Jewish students, often who are influenced by the Israeli friends, who feel that that is threatening. But there's nothing threatening about opposing occupation and oppression. That is not anti-Semitism. You can agree with it or not. Even being anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic. There are hundreds of thousands, if not more, of ultra-Orthodox Jews, including some who are in the Israeli government, who are anti-Zionist. But they're not anti-Semitic. They see themselves as the epitome of Jewishness and Jewish tradition. So there's politics and there's prejudice. And if we don't make a distinction between the two, then what we are actually doing is enforcing a kind of silence over the policies that have been conducted by the Israeli government for a long time and that ultimately culminated now in the utter destruction of Gaza.
Well, I hope you liked the video and give the channel a subscribe. If you can check out my other channel, Progressive Movement, link is on the homepage and in the comments section. That would be appreciated. Now, take care and bye-bye.